On occasion, we have the honor, well, a sad honor, of presenting an award to a colleague who can no longer be here to receive it. And for that award, we have a citation for scientific excellence. The award recognizes members who could not fulfill their career potential because of early death or disability. Our awardee for the citation of scientific excellence this year is our friend Tom Frost. Tom's a good friend of many of us, was an active ASLO member. He's a man whose science, insight, and personality are greatly missed. And to say a few words about Tom and to present this award, Craig Williamson is here. Craig, along with the enthusiastic support of several others, nominated Tom for this award. And Craig, could you come up and talk about Tom, please?
Thanks very much, John. So, Tom Frost was a good friend and colleague. He grew up as the son of a steam fitter in Philadelphia. He went on to get a PhD in biology at an Ivy League school and had a fairly distinguished career as the director of the Trout Lake Station and as a scientist. He lost his life saving his son from drowning in Lake Superior. His science was quite good. He was a world expert in freshwater sponges. He was the director of the Little Rock Lake acidification study. This was a whole lake study in which they divided a lake in half. And he followed the effects of acidification and the effects of recovery. His particular expertise was with the plankton. He also worked on a wide variety of scales, from small laboratory experiments, field experiments, to these whole lake experiments. And because of that, he had a real appreciation for the importance of scale in terms of understanding systems and how you can get different kinds of answers depending on the scale at which you look at these questions. And he published on this as well. He was a program director at the National Science Foundation from 1998 to 1999. And his impact, I think, is still quite apparent. It's apparent from not only this Citation for Scientific Excellence Award, but the fact that the Ecological Society of America established the Thomas M. Frost Award for Excellence with graduate students. And there are several volumes that have been published, several papers that have been written dedicated to Tom Frost. And as I travel the world, it's interesting to encounter people, and particularly in some of the discussions you tend to have over a beer in a pub somewhere. Tom's name comes up quite frequently, and it's clear that he's inspired a lot of young scientists. One example of this was I was at the Global Lake Ecological Observatory Network, GLEON, conference just this year. A fellow named Darren Beatty came up to me and said, "Did you know Tom Frost?" And I said, "Yes, I knew Tom Frost." And he said, "Well, he inspired me at an early age." Apparently, he had read a piece that Tom had written for a children's magazine. And he said, "That's what I want to do with my life." He went on to get his PhD with Steve Carpenter. He went on to get his postdoc with Gene Likens. He's now an assistant professor at Kent State. I think he has a very bright future ahead of him. So just one of the many examples of things that have happened through the years since Tom's passing to show his impact. Tom had great character, too, very curious. He was curious about science. He was curious about politics. He was curious about people. It made him a very engaging person to talk to. He loved coming to these meetings and fully engaging in that. He was perhaps one of the most thoughtful people, if not the most thoughtful person I've ever met. He was always willing to give his time, particularly to young scientists, and to his students and to other students. He was also very good at networking in the sense of getting other people together with key figures in the field. He understood the strength of gentleness. From doing good science to inspiring young minds, Tom contributed to science in its broadest sense. And it's my honor to be involved in this and to introduce his wife, Susan Knight, who I believe is also going to say a few words. at the time of giving the award, we'll read the actual citation that's here.
Thank you very much. Thank you all for being here. It's a little hard to do. Mostly I just wanted to thank everyone, especially Craig, for putting this award together, and thank you all at ASLO for having this award and presenting it to Tom. I know a lot of people also contributed to recommending Tom for this award, including Jim Kitchell, Margaret Palmer, his students Janet Fisher, and Maria Gonzalez. And I'd just like to say just a few words about a little more than what Craig's already said, although he said a lot about Tom's history, and I think the thanks that Tom would like to give to everyone. He started out his undergrad at Drexel University in Philadelphia, and at least at that time they had a co-op program where students went to school for 6 months and then went to work for 6 months. It was a great system. They were mostly engineering students and gave them a great opportunity to find out what they wanted to do. Well, Tom found out very quickly what he did not want to do was go to work. So that led him on to graduate school, and he worked at Dartmouth. And he worked with John Gilbert, and I know many of you know him, and he was one of the past award winners here. And Gilbert was just such a wonderful fellow and created such a terrific atmosphere. He had a great lab, and there were other great students at Dartmouth, too. Of course, Craig was there at the same time as Tom, and Peter Starkweather. Other graduate students with him at Dartmouth at this time in the ecology were Peter White, Peter Vatusek. Probably know many of those names. He just had a wonderful time, and started his work on sponges there. His real love in science was his freshwater sponges. After a stint in Venezuela and then at University of Colorado, he went on to Trout Lake, which he always thought was just the plum job of the entire world. He was so happy there. Tom was really kind of the mayor of Trout Lake. He loved greeting people, and I'm sure he's met many of you, or you've met him. He loved especially to have people come from overseas and show them around, and he just reveled in that. He just loved it. He had a lot of opportunities to do different kind of work that Craig mentioned. He worked on Little Rock Lake project, the acidification project back in the 80s, and of course worked on LTR, the North Temperate Lakes LTER. And one of the favorite things that Tom liked to do was to talk about sponges when people came through. And at one point, for one of the reviews of Little Rock or LTR, I'm not sure, Tom went through his famous line of, I'm sure a lot of you will recognize this gesture. He would hold up his little finger and say, "Do you have any idea how much water a sponge this size could filter?" And he'd say, "A sponge this size could filter an entire lake in 1 week." So he loved saying that. So anyway, one time one of these program directors came through and was not impressed with his story about sponges. And so he said, "Oh yeah? Well, how much can a sponge this size filter in 1 week?" And he held up a different finger. Tom loved to tell that story. And the other thing Tom really loved to do was he loved to travel, and he took every opportunity, and of course we're so glad that he did. He traveled to New Zealand with Jim Kitchell, Japan and Spain and other places with Mike Vanny, and he loved to get to know people from all over the world. And one of the places he ended up traveling, kind of combining traveling and teaching, was an OTS, Organization for Tropical Studies. And as Craig said, Tom was great at looking at the system. Even though we had spent time in Venezuela, he didn't know all the birds, he didn't know all the insects, he didn't know all the plants when he'd go to the tropics. But he could look at a place and just talk about the system. And that's what he liked to do, and he just liked to talk and get ideas going. And one of the reasons he liked that so much, he was working with Julie Denslow, who was a bird ecologist, and Eduardo Santana from Mexico, and of course all the graduate students that he just loved being with. And that brings me to my last thing that I just wanted to thank, is that he had so many graduate students. He didn't have tons of graduate students, but he had a number, and he loved them all, and they were just wonderful. And Tom really loved being with students. He loved mentoring students, and I think they loved him. He was especially involved through ESA in mentoring minority students and was very involved in that program. And he was just so thankful for his life, for his family of colleagues that you all are. He was so thankful to have the job that he did at Trout Lake. He was so just delighted to be a part of the scientific community, and especially the limnologists and oceanographers that he knew through ASLO and through ESA. So thank you for giving him this award, and we all miss him. Thank you.
Thank you for those wonderful comments that you shared with us today. The award goes in honor of Thomas Frost for his contributions as one of the world's leaders in freshwater sponge ecology, for advancing our understanding of lake acidification and the importance of scaling in ecological interactions, and for his unselfish devotion to helping other ecologists in all stages of their careers.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thanks.